Gavin, I want to go to the east of us. We're doing this in Nashville. Tennessee Vols won 11 games a year ago, finished strong with that beating of Clemson in the Orange Bowl. Joe Milton started the last 2 games. Again, you were on the field, not at the same time, but on the other sideline. Kid's got a rocket arm. He's also got an incumbent, not an incumbent, a star recruit behind him, but all indications are that that's his job to lose at this point. I think the chemistry in that room seems to be pretty good from what I hear. What is your take on Joe Milton? Because I mean, he can throw the ball through a concrete wall.
Yeah.
He doesn't always know where it's going. That's the knock on him, as everybody knows. But he also didn't throw a pick a year ago. How do we think that works out in Knoxville this year?
Yeah, well, I think this is going to be a little long-winded, so stay with me. But it all makes sense in the end. I think Joe Milton is obviously unbelievably talented. I mean, he does things as a quarterback in terms of how he throws the ball, how he makes it look so easy. My low, especially at the collegiate level. And so he deserves all his flowers there because he's got the talent through the roof. Now let's start back at the beginning with Josh Heupel. Let's not forget that Joe Milton was the starter for Heupel's first game at Tennessee. He was the guy. He beat out Hendon Hooker in their first fall camp and then eventually got pulled, and Hooker took over. And Hendon Hooker was just this totally different guy than he was at Virginia Tech. And what made Hooker so good is he showed up every game and was the same guy every single game for the University of Tennessee. And, when Milton has come in sometimes, he's shined, he's been great. And so I think the big question with Joe Milton is not, is he talented enough? I think he's talented enough to be up in the top quarterbacks of the SEC. And, if you're in the top quarterback of the SEC, you got a chance of being in New York at the end of the year. I think that's a possibility for Milton. But we got to see it the whole year because he hasn't put a sample size nearly enough to put, to be having all the Kool-Aid that everybody wants to give Tennessee right now. And so I would say that I am confident that he's going to have a big year. I think Heupel's a little bit of a quarterback whisperer. I know that's maybe a little overused a bit, but I mean, it'd be hard to deny that with what we saw with the absolute transformation we saw with Hendon Hooker. And so, Milton's had his times and he shined sometimes, but we need to see it for 12 games in the gauntlet that we all know the Southeastern Conference is, whether it's on the road at Alabama, they got a big game. They got a big game on the road at Kentucky. Then they host Georgia at home at the end of the year. South Carolina at home at the end of the year, which we all know after last year is not a gimme game. And so, these are all games that we need to see him be the same Joe Milton he is when there's no pressure and he can play free because Hendon Hooker's in front of him. We need to see that for a whole 12 games. I think we can. I really do think we can. But we need to see it through all 12 games before we truly give him, maybe all the flowers that he's gotten this whole offseason.
Yeah, Tennessee's an interesting team, guys. I mean, we talked about it, Chris, this summer. They're a team that, like we said, with that system and Milton stepping in, we talk about the 2 running backs coming back, and they've got just a great running back, room. You expect some of those receivers to step up, have big seasons, kind of breakout years. I don't know if it's going to be exactly like a Jalen Hyatt-esque season that we saw, but, Brew McCoy's there, Squirrel White, Ramel Keaton. You look at that defense, Chris, I know you brought them up in the past, just about probably were not as bad as sometimes people made them out to be last year, just a product of how much they're on the field, just with how fast the offense was moving the ball last year. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why it always, comes back to Joe Milton now, because he is, I don't want to say he's the biggest unknown, but like Gavin said, I mean, it's just seeing it a bigger sample size, right? Outside of just, a couple spots here or there. And yeah, I mean, stepping in for a guy like Hendon Hooker just became a Heisman candidate. And I think, as Gavin mentioned too, and Chris, I don't know if this was one of your bold predictions, but somebody talked about Joe Milton being in the Heisman conversation at the end of the season. We were doing that. We talked about it at some point this summer. So yeah, I mean, Tennessee is, I mean, again, I don't think the expectation, and certainly not for Tennessee fans at this point, is for them to go backwards. Once you set that standard of where they are now, I mean, they want it to be back to where they were in the 90s, where it's every single year you're expected to win double-digit games. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the pressure that's on Joe Milton to, be able to lead them to that. And yeah, and let's just go ahead and pull up the comment, Chris. You saw it. Blaine, we know, made one of our predictions. Blaine Gilmer, he said it's going to be Nico time by season's end. That was Blaine's bold prediction in our video, that Joe Milton would not, start every game this season. So kind of plays into the discussion here. So we'll see.
Yeah, I will politely disagree with our friend Blaine, because I think that you said it. You called Josh Heupel a quarterback whisperer. Again, I pointed this out many times. It's not as if when Hendon Hooker transferred in to Tennessee, people were saying, "Oh, here's the next Heisman contender, the next
Yeah.
All SEC guy." He's done this once with a guy that was, was a guy somewhere else, but not the stud that he wound up being. But I want to ask you this, and maybe this is a little bit unfair, because you were an offensive player and you were on the sidelines. But I'm just curious, what was the buzz? How much did that offense change with Joe Milton last year after Hendon Hooker got hurt?
Yeah, I think that with Milton, the biggest thing that is going to be tough to defend is the deep ball, because it's unlimited. I mean, you could be on the 10-yard line and he's going to put it on the opposite 20. And if he's got a guy out there that can run a 4.4, he's got a chance to go get it. And so, I think that makes it so tough, is especially when last year specifically, when you had Jalen Hyatt, who could absolutely fly. You got to back and play a little more deep in your coverage. And so, I think, and I love, we all do. We all sit in the stands and someone throws a deep ball and it's like, and we all love watching that. But if Joe Milton can take what the defense gives him, which is going to be 10-yard curls, which is going to be slants, which is going to be 10-yard digs, and not have his eyes light up like fireworks and want to throw a post or a go every other route, I think that they're going to methodically be able to march down the field and score on anybody. I mean, we saw it last year. Last year was magical for Tennessee. Let's call it what it is. Last year was a magical season for them. Cherry on top was beating Alabama, and they just let it get away from them that night in Columbia. But moving forward, what made them so good was Hooker did everything Heupel told him to do. Hit all his 10-yard routes and then took the deep ones. And, obviously he had the playmakers out there to do it. And so, I think that people are going to want Milton to throw the ball. I'm not kidding. Tennessee fans are going to want Milton to throw the ball 80 yards 4 times a game. And if he doesn't, the fans might boo him. But the thing is, if he can, bang in those slants and the curls, that's just going to open up so much more, because that's what the defense is going to give up. They're going to say, we're going to live with that. We're going to live with the 10-yard catches. We're going to live with the slants. What we can't get beat on is the 60-yard posts, and that's what Milton's going to want to throw.
Yeah, well, and plus, not to mention, NFL scouts are going to be watching to see how he makes those throws. So his coaching staff would not be doing him a favor if they weren't giving him chances to build those in, which I'm sure they will.